university, there are a lot of coordinations and a lot of testing and trials to get this going. So with that, I'll leave it with the team. We have, as you can see here, a few people, but I'll let Joel to introduce them.
So, hello everybody, good morning. I'd like to start off, we're going to have a panel discussion on smart cities, but I'd like to start off with a simple introduction that maybe seems very much like an AA meeting. I'd like to say I'm Joel Myers, and yes, I'm a technologist. A technologist, it's an amazing thing. Most of you, I imagine, are from the technology world. And I grew up in Hong Kong. I was surrounded by digital, surrounded by incredible things going on in the 80s, and very, very exciting for a kid. And even today, I love technology, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about technology. But one of the things about technology is it's an obsession. We love it, and it's hard sometimes to see where boundaries are in our lives. And I think when we talk about two very simple words, smart city, before we saw a presentation where it was two different words, it was digital cities. Now we're talking about smart cities, and there is a big difference. And here we're actually going to be talking about smart cities, and we need to look at what that means. The first thing is that cities are, as we know, very, very complex mechanisms. A lot of things are involved in a city, whether it's the mechanics that make it tick on a daily level with the responsibility of municipalities that are involved. But on the other hand, it's an incredible melting pot. It's a melting pot of cultures, it's a melting pot of traditions, politics, and all the processes that go into that. And sometimes we have a situation where technology seems to overtake everything that a city is about. So what we're trying to do today in the panel discussion is we're going to be discussing, of course, technology, but what we've done in IEEE over the last year or so through the IoT Initiative Smart Cities Working Group, which I co-chair with Rebecca Hammonds over here, is to try to take a step back and say, okay, we all love technology, but we represent IEEE. And IEEE, as said before by Tom, has a very, very simple, but a very, very complicated slogan. It says, it's technology for the benefit of humanity. Now that's an incredible statement because it means a lot. So the responsibility to that, and with IEEE there is a code of ethics on this, so it's not just an easy statement. The whole organisation is around that. And therefore, when I came into smart cities a couple of years ago, I was hearing projects which were mainly about the mechanics of municipalities, so improving the efficiencies of some of the resources or the services the municipality had, whether it was energy or transportation, etc. What we've decided to do as a working group is take to heart what the slogan that IEEE runs, and say to ourselves, well, hold on, we're running very fast in technology, but we need to step back and look at the people that we're representing within those cities and say, well, what do people want? What, for the sake of humanity, do we want? In 2050, 2/3 of the world's population is going to be part of this city. So I'd like just to introduce everybody in the panel. And then Chelsea will take over from me on the panel discussion. We have Victor Larios, who's from Guadalajara as well, who's very kindly logged in. They have an incredible Smart City Innovation Center. We have, obviously, Stephen you already know, from Austin, and Rebecca had introduced, and Chelsea, who's going to be leading the panel, is the founder of DigiCities, Digital Cities, and a local Austin lady. Hopefully, if it's possible, we may have lost him, but we have Konstantinos Champidis, who is the Secretary General for the Ministry of Technology in Greece, and he was the Chief Digital Officer for the city of Athens, which won the European Capital of Innovation in 2018 under him. So I pass you over to Chelsea.
So my job is relatively easy here. I simply get to just hold the floor for these smart people both here in the room and joining us from abroad. And first, before we just get into the meat of it, I'd like to just take a second to appreciate this event. Really an appreciation to Fozzie. I've been to this event year after year. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a technologist, I'm a translator between all of the different sectors that we've talked about today. And I always come away with this both really overwhelmed by all the things that I do not know, and also very heartened that we're all on the same page with our own perspectives, moving it forward, because this digital transformation is going to take all of us, both being very patient with each other and also being very impatient, as the world has challenges that need all of us coming together. So my name is Chelsea Collier. I'm the founder of DigiCity, which is just simply a platform to share best practices that I've learning about smart cities for the past 4.5 years. I participate in Smart Cities Connect. I participate in Austin City Up, really any sort of platform that brings people from different disciplines together to look at solving some of these challenges. So everybody's going to go through their own presentations in terms of their perspectives around smart cities. But before we get into the one-on-ones and the deep dives, I thought it might be helpful just for each of the people on the panel to answer what is a smart city? You know, first an introduction of who you are and what you're all about, what you care about, your perspective, and then what is a smart city from your perspective and some key themes. So Dr. Larios, Dr. Victor Larios, who's joining us from Guadalajara, maybe we'll start with you and then we'll go through the
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, very happy to be with you, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just what is the meaning of smart city? Everybody says that there is no definition. I say that it's just the fact that to get or to reach the best quality of life that you can get in a city. That's the main goal for the smart city.
Dr. Larios, I'm so sorry. We're having a hard time with the audio. Maybe, I don't know if it's on your end or here with the volume. I don't want to touch this thing, so I'll break it. We're calling the engineers in the room.
Oh, be careful.
No. I don't know if there's a way you can increase the volume on your end, Dr. Larios.
Okay, so usually the microphone.
Yeah, I think it's the speaker
Can you hear me?
in this room, actually.
Okay.
I'm looking at a screen that says shut down system, yes or no, so I don't want to touch it. I'm just going to go like this.
Mike's flowing.
We're playing with the toys over here, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr.
Okay.
Can you give us a test on your end?
Yes, can you hear me? 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Might actually be a little too loud now.
It's okay. Can you hear?
That's perfect. I think that works.
That's perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
So no, you're welcome. So very fast. The smart city is just to look for the best quality of life that you can give in the challenge that we have today just getting a lot of people concentrated in a small place that we call cities. And we use the vehicle of technology just to make it happen, because it's so complex today to connect everything that happens in a city just to reach the quality of life. And in the center of that, our goal is the people. So technology is just a vehicle, and the people is in the center, and that's what we are looking for smart cities as a definition. And what I do, I am the director of a Smart Cities Innovation Center that started like 6 years ago here at the University of Guadalajara. It started with the project of the Smart City of Guadalajara. I have about 10 years working in the smart cities projects, and I care just to remember for the authorities and for all the people that goes with technology with a lot of passion that they don't need to forget the people. The people is in the center, and technology can help the people to be more connected and just getting a better quality of life. But it's just a way to do it, and that's what we used to say and to connect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Rebecca Hammonds. I teach in the Center for Information and Communication Sciences at Ball State University in Indiana. And as Joel mentioned, for a couple of years we have been co-chairing a working group on smart cities under the IEEE IoT initiative. And we've done a lot of research on what makes a city smart, and there are so many definitions, the European Union definition, IEEE's definition. Each city defines it themselves. But what we have found in our research is that the implementations vary based on the needs and problems in each community. So when I went to Singapore, there were one set of issues being addressed that were very much about enforcing rules and using technology to be more of a regulatory tool for ICT in the community. I was in Portland, Oregon a couple of weeks ago at a conference there on smart cities, and we find that they're focusing mainly on transportation, which is a big problem. I'm sure you don't have that problem here. And disaster preparedness, they expect a 10.0 earthquake within the next 50 years that will be very dramatic in its impacts on infrastructure. Agriculture is also a key theme for them in problem solving for their community, and building management as well. Each time I visit a different community that is a smart city, I find that they are using ICT to address their own individual problems. What I found in Toronto, and I've been doing a lot of research on the situation there recently, is that the smart city planning may not have been done from the ground up based on the needs of the people so much, but more based on opportunity. Are you familiar with Toronto's Smart Cities endeavor?
The Sidewalk Labs initiative.
Right, Sidewalk Labs, sister company with Google, and the city cut a deal. But they have had multiple failures and lessons learned over the last 2 years that may have brought the project to a halt yesterday. October 31st was their deadline. They have communication plan failures with stakeholders, stakeholder engagement issues, very big unresolved concern about who owns the data generated by the public Wi-Fi. And now the Canadian Civil Liberties Union has filed a lawsuit against the city to halt the project on behalf of the people. In fact, one journalist was quoted as saying, in the nearly 2 years since the announcement, countless scandals, breaches, and ethical concerns surrounding the world's biggest technology companies have forced issues of data security, ownership, and privacy rights into the spotlight. That's really a lot of what our working group has been focused on, is to I take the points in the IEEE Code of Ethics seriously and try to promote them to be the basis for some of the standards that are created in being people-centric. We wrote a Bill of Rights for Smart Cities Initiatives, which we are circulating, has 8 points that we can talk about offline or later, that are all about people-centric smart cities and making sure that we don't have industry partners coming in and dominating and influencing the outcomes such that the rights of people that live in the communities are violated. So we've also identified an imperative that smart city services and products must be transparent, resilient, and interoperable based on globally agreed smart city standards and designed, piloted, and certified in collaboration with all stakeholders who are affected, including the citizens. So that's what we're trying to impress upon the technologists that are engaged in the city planning for solutions, is that there's a real opportunity to promote the focus on people and avoid the type of backlash that's currently occurring in Toronto with the best laid plans. Thanks. Joel?
And maybe we'll just kind of go off script a little bit. And just wanted to see if there were, from the panel, if there were any reactions or comments based on Dr. Hammond's comments. You might want to react or chime in.
I'm biased because I work with Rebecca, but I'll pass on to Stephen. I think is an interesting point of view more from the city. But I too, I'm an entrepreneur, and I work in basically on the side of connectivity. But when I talk about connectivity, I'm usually talking about face-to-face connectivity rather than just helping us to connect through these devices or whatever other devices we're using. I think we really have an enormous responsibility, because on the one side we're very excited, and we're always very excited about doing new things and getting involved. Politically, it's always very nice to take on board big projects and be seen to be at the forefront of what's happening in the world. But on the other hand, there are enormous issues in cities across the world, whichever side of the world we're talking about. You might hear from my accent, I'm British, although I live in Italy, so I have different sides of it to me. But from the UK point of view, I think many of you would be surprised to know that London, this glamorous and exciting city, was named the most lonely city in the world. Londoners.
Loneliness officer.
Well, not only we have a minister. We have a minister for loneliness.
Minister of loneliness.
A minister of loneliness.
It's not funny, but
and it's funny, but it's also really sad to think that London, where millions of tourists go to flock, but the people that live and work there are in difficulty. And that isn't just a London problem, and it's not just a Tokyo problem, because in Tokyo they have all sorts of things because of these issues, like places where you can go to rent a friend, and I'm not talking about a strange friend, I'm talking about real friends, because they don't have time or mode to find friendship. And isn't that a terrible thing? It's happening all over the world. Even in Mexico and in Latin American countries, which are more like my Rome, Italy, which is a very social community. We found that because over the last 30 years we've had an amazing revolution in technology, and if you look at internet and then social media, it's incredible. We've gone global. We really have gone global. I remember at university we were always talking about going global and the economics of it, but we didn't have the tools. Then the 90s hit us, and we had the tool. Then in 2004 we had Facebook. And we reached out to all sorts of people, friends and family, and we keep in touch with them with all other types of social media. But on the other hand, what we found is that our millennials are not actually face-to-facing. They don't enjoy the idea of meeting up with people. And
And their parents love that, right?
Yeah, their parents love it. Yeah, exactly. I'm a parent, and it's a difficult thing to adjust to one of these, because if you don't give them one of these, they're excluded. Once you give them one of these and they promise they'll only use it for making phone calls or maybe some WhatsApp or something, now of course this becomes their life. And everything is filtered by this. And I'm the same. So, I mean, I'm sure most of us are the same. We're filtered by this thing over here. So when I hear about connectivity, I worry, because the truth is we're not really talking about human connectivity. We're talking about what this can do or what any other device can do about connectivity. And that's not what human beings need. Human beings thrive on contact, physical contact. That's what cities should be about. But in fact what we see is that if you're in a village, you're more likely to get that and know people. We talk about security issues in cities and safety. And we talk about strangers. Well, the truth is, our circles are so small. Our time for other people is so small. But what happens is, our circles close, we get behind these and think that our circles are getting bigger, but what they're doing is actually getting smaller. And because of that, we're less safe, we're less secure in a city, because we don't know anybody in a city.
That's really the role, right, of technology, is to be the enabler to help our cities function in a way that's more streamlined, so we can connect with people outside of our immediate experience that has the ability to come through the portal of this mobile phone. I just want to do a time check, because I know we're a little bit behind schedule. Dr. Larios, do you have a hard stop coming up? I just wanted to time the presentation so we're not stepping over your allotted time.
No, it's okay for me. For me, so you can go on. I have the time. No problem.
Thank you so
much. It's very interesting.
So, Stephen, I don't know if you have some comments, if you want to go through your presentation and anything reactive to the comments that Dr. Hammond and Joel were
sharing. I would say I agree with the comments. I mean, the easy answer would be yes.
Yeah.
And so, but the Rebecca talked about the definition of smart cities, and different cities have different definitions. And the way the city defines smart cities is we say solving real problems for real people. And so it's not introducing tech for the sake of introducing tech, but it's really trying to identify what are problems within the community, and let's use technology to solve those what those problems or challenges are. One of the big challenges is the growth that cities are experiencing. So how do you keep up with the service levels or improve the service levels without growing your staff? And that's one of the challenges the cities find themselves in. And so yeah, I agree with what Joel and Rebecca said about the purpose of smart cities, and it's a lot of it has to be ground up and not tops down, and because I think that's where the problems originate is from the ground up, and I think that you address it top down, or you're trying to identify it top down, and you're kind of removed, and you start getting into these privacy issues, and you're solving a problem that may not actually be a problem, but it's just an enhancement in your community. So I'm on board with the conversation so far.
And that's a beautiful complexity of this. I spent time in Singapore and China, and the top-down approach, man, sure is efficient. And even the kind of experiment that's happening in Toronto in sidewalk labs. I truly believe they're trying to implement technology in a way that makes those city services more efficient and run a business at the same time. But when it's just top-down, without the intersection of bottom-up, then you run into a whole bunch of challenges, and that's what we're here to do, is figure out how do you intersect the human piece of it with the technology piece of it, all the while going through massive organizational transformation, both on private and public sector side.
I think that you focus a little bit on business and computer ethics when you're building your strategies for smart cities, and you don't preclude those concerns which have been unaddressed by some industry partners in recent years and have been subject to some level of abuse that has caused backlash by citizens.
And have a format to be able to hold everyone accountable to the same level of standards and ethics as defined.
Just to say that I think we should be flexible in this debate as well. I think we'll see. Madam, for example.
Very, very simple question. I think the two aspects to it. One is from the panel. Every city has leadership. How important is the mindset of that leadership to be actually accommodating to technical solutions, number one. And then number two, I think from our friend from Austin, cities don't live in isolation. You have major problems to deal with. Okay, how do you deal with the organizational structure that may involve 20, 30, 40 different political organizations that all have a say in what an outcome will actually be?
And would you mind saying your name and your affiliation?
Yeah, I'm Adam Droban, and I'm associated with the IEEE IoT initiative.
Who wants to take that massive question?
Yeah, I'll start. So absolutely right. So within the city, there's the county, and then you have the state, and so you have all these organizations that a resident is part of. They're part of their neighborhood, and so there's all these pieces that have to be coordinated, and so we can look at one of the things that's happening right now, right? It's that's in the news. It's the homelessness.
Number one in City of Austin.
Yeah, the homelessness challenge. Well, the state feels the city's not managing it properly, and starting Monday, the state said they would weigh in and they would take action. And so where this is going, and I think Chelsea was saying this too, that there's a lot of coordination that has to happen. And I think we saw it in the first keynote of all the different devices that need to interact. Well, change the devices to people. I mean, there's all this coordination that has to happen in order to be successful with these smart city initiatives and identifying what the problems and the challenges are. The residents for Austin are the same residents for Travis County and the same residents for the state of Texas. And again, there has to be, I think Joel was talking about the human interaction and touching, and so the coordination just has to be better in order to solve these problems.
And it's so interesting, the smart cities conversation. So many times we start off with, okay, let's talk about the technology and define the technology, and we always end up to this wonderful place, which is it's about humans. And when we start from a collective values perspective, and at least have a shared understanding of what our values are, just from a resident of Austin, I'm not entirely sure that's the same between the government of the city of Austin and the government of the state of Texas. And I think that's the clash that we're seeing in technology is the expression of that. And I see your questions, I certainly don't want to ignore it. I just want to make sure that I'm being inclusive, Dr. Lucas. I know you're not here in the room, so I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to any of that.
I think that the challenge that we have is a way to, as they said, to coordinate. But this coordination comes also starting to be more efficient by sharing data. So usually the state has some information, the municipalities or the cities, they have other information, but they don't share that. And when you have a problem, for example, in transport, you have a budget and you are very specialized for that, and you look only for transport. But if transport is creating air pollution, then you have another thing with environment, and then with healthcare. And if you don't look how to unify the information and to share that information, and that's about breaking the silos that we are creating, that's a first starting point. And then to bring also the experts to start sharing what they know and create multidisciplinary approaches. And this is the big challenge for the smart cities. It is a change of mindset, if we can say, how we need to work the projects, because we teach at the universities to be the best in your discipline. But we don't teach very well how to collaborate with other experts in other disciplines. And then we have some gaps with the language, how they can express with the teams a solution that will be useful for everybody, and that is bringing another kind of experience and also another kind of efficiency.
So, question, yes, sir.
Joel, your description of loneliness is very interesting. Actually, I was thinking of that Beatles song. What are they? Because it's interesting, we've got technology that allows us to interact with each other more than we ever had before, except we're not really there. So what have you found, or what have people found with regard to loneliness? And I think the whole thing about, especially millennials, there's a lot less of them that are engaged in professional work. For example, professional organizations.
Yeah.
It's a real issue to get them, maybe even engaged in civic activities. Have you found anything interesting in it?
Yes, I think we found quite a lot in the research we were doing, in the brainstorming we were doing across the globe with the members of the working group that Rebecca and I were sharing. But we also have, I think every one of us has examples of our own lives. And I think that's perhaps more important, because when we were doing the working group, and we still are, what we found is that people dropped the technologist clothing during the discussions, at least initially, and concentrated more on looking at themselves and their families and the way in which they react and interact as communities. And it was interesting that whether they were coming from, these members were from Singapore or Hong Kong or from America or from Europe, we all had the same issues. And loneliness, yes. I mean, loneliness in any city, I think, has always been an issue.
Yeah.
Because, of course, when you go to a city, very often you move away from a different background, away from your family, looking for work, maybe, looking for opportunity. And so you end up in the middle of this incredible space that has lots of things happening, but you feel outside, an outsider. But it's got worse than that, because of the fact that we, as humans, we're also quite lazy. I think intrinsically we're a lazy race, and the idea for me to sit at home and just click on the button to buy something on Amazon or eBay or whatever it is, or buy a hotel or whatever, we don't go out anymore as much as we need to. And in fact, local economies are dying because of it. In the UK and in Europe, the high streets are dying. In America, malls are dying. And so we're more isolated. We stay at home a lot more. We don't communicate so much. And with the social media situation, we're teaching people to be our digital clones. So millennials are more interested in cloning what they would like to be, and what they present themselves to be, and also, unfortunately, what others want them to be. And therefore, that's what we've become. And although we're all sitting in this room and we're excited and interested in the technologies that are available, I mean, with Dell we saw some incredible things, and we see incredible things around us. But my issue, and Rebecca is even stronger on it, the ethical side. As technologists, we also just need to look at ourselves, and each of us do what we can to try to create a life that we want to live in as well. So do we need all of these things that we are striving to achieve? Or are they just feasible because technology is allowing us to achieve them? If you ask an Italian whether they want an autonomous car, no way. I mean, they love to drive. You take away driving from them, then they lose one of the passions of life. And it's just an example, and I'm not saying that autonomous vehicles don't have a sense.
But would they like to get from one area of the city to another faster and more efficiently?
Italians go very fast.
Well done.
And when I look at artificial intelligence, I think if it could understand an Italian and the way in which they drive, then I think we could resolve a lot of things in life. But the waving in and out of scooters, the hooting, and sometimes not. If you're in Naples, for example, a traffic light that is red is an opinion. So, but
suggestion maybe.
Or in India.
no, I mean, and they hoot if you stop. So, but these societies function. that traffic works.
Or
And why does it work? Because it's human beings behind it. And on the one side, yes, I want to see more efficient systems. I think especially when budgets are difficult, where responsibilities are increasing. But we still need to stop, look back and say, okay, we represent technology, but we represent it for the present and future. And therefore, loneliness, trust. I mean, Rebecca was talking about trust. We've already started losing trust in the community because we've run through technologies that are faster than anything that we can regulate, and now we see that we got problems because people just woke up and say, hold on, I just gave my life away on Facebook or whatever, and I didn't realize it. Well, hold on, come on, you know it. That's what
One of the points that we've been trying to address with regards to smart cities is what can we learn from history and other innovations that have come into play in our lifetime. At one time, tobacco was pretty unregulated and pretty popular. Oh yeah, it's good for you, take a break. Now we see that research has shown that there are some downsides and regulatory processes came into play. The same thing happened with the automobile and aircraft industry over time. And we're just suggesting that unfettered smart cities without a real advocacy for the rights of people who live in the communities creates digital petri dishes for industry that may publish corporate social responsibility policies but may not actually follow those in their practices. And we feel that we should get in front of that and not wait until damage has been done in communities with regards to data privacy, as an example.
Completely agree. And do you believe that that goal is a global standard, a federal standard, statewide standard?
We believe that there should be global standards that are applicable to the implementation and strategies for smart cities.
And IEEE obviously is a leader in that standardization. How do you all work with different standardized bodies in that respect?
Well, the cool thing about the IoT initiative is it's a collaborative effort amongst multiple societies and funded by many societies within IEEE at this time. So we have pretty broad participation. I'd like to read just a couple of comments from the Code of Ethics for IEEE. Point 1 is to hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public, to strive to comply with ethical design and sustainable development practices, and to disclose promptly factors that might endanger the public or the environment. Point 5 also emphasizes to improve the understanding by individuals and society of the capabilities and societal implications of conventional and emerging technologies, including intelligence systems. And those are just two elements of the IEEE Code of Ethics, and we would like to help re-educate people on the critical importance of why those were written and what role those ethical practices play in the design and implementation of technologies. For example, we're going to have billions of sensors and IoT devices in communities on light poles and such to be able to gather the data that is desirable to manage the infrastructure. Most of these devices are throwaway, and how many of you have an Amazon Dot, for example, or a Google Home? And you're not going to send that in for repair. It's $20. You can toss it when it's done. But think about the billions of devices we're putting into communities that are not repairable, maintainable, sustainable, updatable. They're so low cost. The intention is to toss them and replace them with new technology in a couple of years. And fundamentally, is that really good for humanity? Those are questions that people that belong to IEEE should be asking now, not in 10 years.
Thank you so much. It's really thoughtful. Let's take it from global to local. Steve, I want to give you a chance to comment on some of that, and Dr. Larios would like your thoughts as well.
So, I don't think an entry point into the conversation is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, The one thing, I talked earlier about the equity piece, and I know we're talking about the too much tech, but I also think there's a space where there's too little tech, and so I think that we need to make sure that we don't exclude parts of our community, that there is this whole, this digital equity piece that is happening where the connectivity, the speeds, the enhancements are happening in certain parts of the city, in cities, and not all parts of the city. And I was thinking about this when the keynote was, when she was talking about this autonomous vehicles, and I know 5G. Putting it from downtown Austin and not out in all the areas. At some point it expands out there, but if the way these autonomous vehicles communicate is through 5G, then we're saying that autonomous vehicles cannot go to all parts of the city. And so you kind of, we talked about driving across the country from California to, through Austin to Florida to New York, but think about going from downtown Austin to East Austin. And so those things need to be addressed, and it's not just the tech. There's also a training component as well. And so the strategies have to be about the people, not just the tech. And so, I would offer that as a area of conversation. Is that what are we doing to make smart communities as we look at smart cities?
I really appreciate that, particularly about your and the city of Austin's just constant insistence that we have the right conversation around digital equity and inclusion. A lot of cities that I visit with across the country, it's almost kind of, let's have the technology conversation, and oh yeah, we can't forget about this part. But in Austin, it is the driver, and I as a resident, I sincerely appreciate that. Dr. Lear, I just want to give you a chance to comment on this.
Okay, I am part of the community for IEEE Smart Cities initiative from when it started in 2012. And when it was an initiative before coming to a community, it was more open. But now we have like stakeholders inside the IEEE societies, and the big owner of this initiative now is the Power and Energy Society. And that changes the point of view. So yes, the answer is yes, we need some framework for the standards, to have one that help with the best practices, and then one of each societies can add some value for the standards of IEEE. But also it's important, the challenge that we have, that smart cities, they started with the industry, but the society and the cities, they are not working like the companies or the industry. And the government is something with a lot of challenges, because they are changing every 3 years or every number of periods, the administrations. And then it's important to have some reference, and that's a big opportunity for IEEE or other organizations to give some guidance in that way. And also, which is important, is that we are not waiting that the technology is going to make smart the people. It's the people that use better the technology that make it smarter, and it's more that we say it's the smart society, or is how they use the things. So Joel was saying about the society and the people that is becoming lazy, but we need to understand that in the complexity of this big amount of people living in cities, the challenge is that everybody, we need to be part of the city and put our small effort to make it better, a better place to live. That's all.
Thank you. When using the visual of your conference room there, I think we can get there in terms of everyone as a human, your needs getting taken care of, everyone being included in all of that. But it takes different people from different perspectives sitting at that table. And standards, incredibly important, the ethical side of things, and also guidelines of what's allowable, what's not allowable, and what you can do in the framework. And then you have a place to play. Stephen.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of go back. I was thinking about Rebecca's comment about the tech and the throwaway. Unfortunately, that's the way the tech is being designed. It has a short shelf life. Tech changes so fast, and maybe this is where the inclusion conversation comes in, that we need to partner better so that the tech does not have such a short shelf life. It's usually that it needs to be repaired. It just needs to be updated, and so if you look at the speeds and the memory, and so those things grow so fast that the devices you currently have can't keep up. So a phone you may have had 2 years ago is not as functional as the phone
That's by vendor choice, because they are able to get you to upgrade your phone every couple of years if it's a throwaway phone. But you'll find the Fairphone company out of the Netherlands does make a sustainable and maintainable smartphone that's very popular with T-Mobile customers in Europe. It just isn't allowable here in the U.S. for a variety of reasons that are due to lobbying more than design principles.
And so we're saying the same thing, and that's why I was saying the inclusion conversation. The vendor community has to be part of the discussion.
Absolutely.
And,
when it's so cool, this point in time, and on the non-technical side, let's just talk about the clothes we wear. I mean, we wear disposable clothing, which is not good for our planet. It's not good for our landfills. And there was this new groundswell around consumers saying, we're not going to put up with that anymore. We want a different choice. And so I think it's all up to us as individuals to make that choice, to make our voices heard, to talk about this, not just in terms of sustainable and ethical clothing, which is a passion of mine, but around the technology side of things. And maybe it's not a quick fix, but it's a movement if we make it that. So many questions. Oh,
Yeah,
I love
bunch
this audience engagement. All right, just to be fair, I'm going to go here, and then back to you, sir. Yes, sir.
Hi. So, Mark Shirley, interested in what are the measures of success for smart cities? So, we talk a lot about strategy and so forth, but really, how do we know that we're achieving what it is that we want to achieve as smart cities?
I'm glad you asked that question, because our working group is currently developing KPIs associated with the 8 elements of our Smart Cities Bill of Rights, and Joel can read to you what those elements are that we've established.
Thank you. So just to go through the 8 points, which basically a lot of what we've been talking about are within these 8 points. So the first was a discussion of social and physical well-being. Very often we talk about smart cities, but we skip
the side well-being.
So that's the first point. The second point is regarding employment and opportunities in employment and local economies, and how we're developing local economies. Because if we don't create local economies, then what is the point of being in a city? We can all meet up like we're doing here, not necessarily here, but with Dr. Labios across in Mexico. Third point, interpersonal connectivity, which we discussed before, the idea of using cities for the purpose of actually physically meeting up, which is what happened up until the 1950s. Jane Jacobs was a big promoter of what was going on in building urban areas where people could meet, because that creates connectivity opportunity for personal growth and for economic growth. The physical environment, so the basic idea that smart cities have to also interact with the urban side of design, but also what the type of discussions we're having on the environment itself, which is not just green environment, but it's also about waste.
On electronic waste.
Yeah. Of course, security and privacy needs to be in the discussion about smart cities. It's a growing concern. People are now woken up to it, so we need to make sure we're on the ball. And social communities. So in the end, bringing all of these different types of communities together. The seventh is equality. So we were discussing digital equality, and exactly. I mean, it's a big question. If you have a pilot that starts off in a certain area of a city, then is it going to grow to the rest of the city? What happens when you go outside of that area of a city itself? And cities are continuously changing as well, so they're growing. So not easy things to deliver on, but also if you don't deliver the possibility that everybody can have that type of technology, that type of internet connection or whatever, then you create an enormous difference in opportunity.
Well, even without a smartphone, you're at a major disadvantage in most urban communities now.
Yeah, and some people spend their money on the internet or on technology, but they don't have enough money for other things, and that's pressure. The last thing is one of the most important things, and it's about participation. And people that live, work, and visit a city need to participate in the process of design. You were talking about a Petri dish, and that's a question of trust. We want people to adopt. We want people to adopt these solutions. We were talking to somebody in India in the ministry for the 100 Smart Cities pilot, and they said that their biggest problem isn't developing solutions for smart cities, is that nobody's actually using them. Because there's no communication and no trust with society itself. And we continue to use the word citizen, which it has a basic definition of responsibility, but in both directions. But actually we're talking about people, us. We're all citizens. But
And residents in Texas, citizens
Yeah.
means something a little different than residents.
residents.
We can even expand that definition.
And if you talk to people in tourism, you're talking about visitors, and they can be the greatest economy for a city as well. So all of these things we're trying to deal with within IEEE to change the way in which we define smart cities. Yeah, and measure, as you were saying, and that's the first step, is to understand how they can be measured, because otherwise it's a great thought process, but it has no way of understanding whether we're achieving anything. So that's our next step. To get to standards, well, I suppose the first thing we're trying to achieve is a framework rather than a standard, because standards are being developed in so many verticals that are involved in smart cities. But try to bring them together, and part of our working group is non-IEEE people. We actually have people that are part of smart city networks, such as in Smart Africa or in India, and that's in the 100 Smart Cities mission. But bringing together also people from other associations like IEC or NC, the standards in Europe, and having open conversation.
So you're living that value of exclusivity. You're living the value of inclusivity. I just realized.
Absolutely. What Stephen said was very true.
Yeah, exactly right. Stephen, just wanted to give you a chance to react, and Dr. Leros, if you had anything to add before I move on to the next question. Good. Okay, perfect. Dr. Leros, good.
No, I think that having a framework is very important, and we need to take the advantage that smart cities started more than 10 years ago, and we have a lot of experiences, lessons learned that we need to share, because cities must decide what works for them, what doesn't work. We don't see a city that will be the IBM city with the unique solution for the city and just one company providing that. So we also need to empower these communities to produce their local innovation that will be enriching an ecosystem of possibilities for other cities to grow in a better way. But at the end of the day, the smart city is a journey. You decide to go through this journey because you want to change things and to have a better place to live. And that's why communities are very important.
Sir, did it feel like your question was answered?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, perfect. Yes, sir, I promised you next, and then we'll keep going, promise.
Oh, he's had his hand up for a long time. Yeah,
Okay, got it. I totally get it. I hear you. And by the way, this side of the room, we love you. Sorry. You're absolutely right. Yes, sir.
Okay. I've been involved in smart cities through two outlets. One is my membership in the City of Austin Technology and Telecom Commission, and also in a recent agreement with the city of Pune, India, which is also a smart city. And I'm wondering whether the whole definition of smart cities is self-limiting. And I'll give you two examples. One was the example that Stephen mentioned about homelessness, where the city council here is very much at odds with how the governor feels. And in energy use, we are very involved in going to renewable energy, into smart metering. Don't know what the state believes in. We certainly know what the country believes in. They've backed out of the Paris Accord. So the cities can only do so much when it is not in alignment with the county, with the state, with the country. So is the definition of smart cities self-limiting? Should we be doing more to expand the horizon so that we can all work together? Not just among smart cities, but among counties, among countries.
I have some thoughts on that, but I'm not the expert here, so I'll leave it to the panel, and if there's an opportunity, I'll chime in too. Yeah, I know it's.
Nobody else wanted to answer this one. Well, of course, we need cooperation across the different areas within government, because if the city doesn't have the power to develop a vision, or it's in conflict with something that is creating pressure on it, then it's not going to work. What we see at the moment is that there are city networks that exist that, whether it's, as I was saying, in India, it's easier because you have a very large continent, what I would call a continent, and they have just 100 pilots. In Europe, if you're in a country, they may only have a couple of pilots. At the moment, the majority of them are working independently as projects, and even within countries, you get cities that are producing, for example, mobile applications for parking, but they don't have the same application that maybe another city has produced. So there's lots of duplicity. And yes, I think here IEEE can have a big say because it's an international association and represents some brilliant people. And in fact, when we were at the World Forum in Limerick that Adam was organising on IoT, we were called in by various governments to try to broker an idea of getting together across continents, across standards associations, to define the basics, because afterwards every city will have their own priorities. But if we can define the basics and agree on those, then it's already an incredible achievement. And then, yes, within each vertical, try to define what is an accepted standard, so there's some interoperability.
Stephen, your thoughts?
Sorry.
So I believe that the collaboration between city and counties are a lot easier. The thinking is very similar because they're so closely connected. I was just thinking of another example on 5G, where the city was having conversations with the carriers about 5G and expanding it across the city, not just in downtown. And the state weighed in and said that here's what it's going to cost to connect, and this is the process. And so all that negotiation that the city was trying to do went away. The carriers, in turn, basically, I guess they were going two paths. They were working with the state and working with the city. And in turn, the state weighed in, and that was the end of, providing 5G across the city. It's put it wherever you want to. So those things are challenging, and I don't know what the answer is on how to fix that relationship. And I don't think changing the definition of smart cities is it. I think there's a lot of good that's happening across cities, with the county, across states, even across the country, that there's a lot of sharing of information. And I think for the most part, in the government space, there is no competition, so the sharing is welcomed. And so again, I don't think changing, but again, there is a problem that needs to be resolved.
And ultimately, it's about scale, right? I mean, smart cities, the whole definition is about the intersection of humanity with technology. And in its best iteration, it does three things. It makes things more efficient. It increases the quality of life for humans. And it also provides economic opportunity that didn't exist before. So that's a technology play, that's an industry play, that's also a government play, and a humanity play. So, I think one of the beautiful things, which is incredibly complex, is that, using the Paris Accord as an example, when that happened, I saw a new energy, pun intended, between local municipalities saying, all right, we're not waiting for the regulation to come from on high. We're going to get busy and we're going to collaborate with each other. We're going to create our own pieces of this. And by the way, there has to be some standards across that, because otherwise it's just a patchwork approach, which is its own bit of a challenge. So I don't think there's any one answer. And I just want to be fair. Sir, I told you I would have you ask your question, and then we'll come to you, and then I know there's another hand up here. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This was touched on a little bit earlier, but I'd like to look at it from the other side of the equation. You talked about technology evolution and the disposable nature of that. But a lot of the infrastructure projects that the technology is to fit into have much longer evolution cycles. Orders of 10, 20...
Sir, there's a microphone right next to you.
Orders of 10 or 20 or 30 years, sometimes even longer. And in addition, a lot of infrastructure is not market funded, it's grant funded. So you have this dichotomy where the evolution, technology evolution is increasing, but the recipients of this, at least in terms of public infrastructure, often push back in terms of trying to hold on to old technologies because they're not prepared to move forward with the new. In a lot of instances, people will argue it's difficult to go back to a bridge. It's not the cost of technology, it's the cost of retrofitting a bridge with the technology. Airplanes is another key area where people will tell you if you got to cut a hole in an airplane, that's a major expense to fit in new technology. How do you embrace this issue between electronics, which is evolving, smartphones, every 9 months there's a new smartphone, every 7 to 10 years there's a new basic technology, and how to deal with infrastructure projects where the cost of upgrade can in fact be significant and very, as I said, episodic. I've had discussions with the FAA where they didn't want LTE because their plan was that they'd upgrade within 10 years. So they wanted some of the regulators to not allow the old technology to disappear for at least 10 years. So,
well, I think the truth of it is that no smart city is all net new. Almost every implementation involves working with the current existing infrastructure and determining how you might get funding to do incremental steps or improvements and integrate those with existing infrastructure in order to move forward. So I think that we're constantly evolving in a smart city and looking at new elements that we get funding for. But from the vendor standpoint, I think the cities need to get really strict with the maintainability, serviceability, and evolutionary capabilities of technology that you acquire and put them into the specific requirements that you make on projects, not only just look at what's available from a vendor today.
And Dr. Lawyers, I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that if you were able to hear the question.
Yes, I think that one of the challenges with the technologies and for the smart cities is that you have millions of devices that you're going to place in the city, which you are talking about changing the public lights system to something more smart with a lot of sensors to learn or discover things that can bring some innovation for the city. Then you have a big challenge, but also retaking what Rebecca said before, it's going to work for a couple of years and then you're going to change that, but you are talking about a lot of sensors. So thinking about a new way to produce that and give some guidances also as part of a framework, like for example, taking the example of other cities that are working with circular economy can help. The government needs to regulate, that's something important. Some cities, they invested so much in infrastructure that changing to another thing, it's an area of opportunity for innovation. What you're going to do, how you're going to shift, or how you're going to do it better with what we have and do it more efficient. But it depends, and that's why it's very important to have a group of innovators, a community inside that adapts everything and look for the new challenges. And it's good that this group of innovators are in contact with others in the world just to share that experience.
I think what's interesting is that although some cities or countries may have started earlier, it does create problems, because when you start early, you have the problems of then catching up, because what you have is other countries that didn't do anything, weren't in the position to do anything. If you look at Africa, and Smart Africa has, for example, 24 nations that are pushing forward all sorts of projects, starting from telecommunications. They don't have problems that we have in Europe, or that maybe we have in America, where they didn't have anything before, so they can start from scratch. So it is also playing catch up, and also trying to politically discuss what you already have and make sure that you're not wasting, that you're building on what we have already. But it creates a lot more issues than if you just start from the beginning. But of course we can't keep starting from the beginning, so it's an enormous problem that we have to face, and that's where you need cooperation from whichever level of government it is, and regulation.
I'd just like to say that also technology specialists should collaborate more keenly with city planners to help them build non-functional requirements out that can be included in specifications. We're kind of requiring on technologists at the city level to have such a broad general scope of skills, but actually we're better suited to collaborate and help them, to guide them in the non-functional specs that they should be bidding out to companies, and not letting the companies drive that effort if they want to have sustainable, maintainable gear.
So I would agree. You're absolutely right. The infrastructure does not change as frequent as some of the endpoint devices is what we were talking. What I was talking about. That is probably more disposable. I mean, the challenge with the cities, and I was talking about the growth that cities are experiencing, is that there's a infinite list of things that the city needs to do. And there's just finite resources to do those things. And so you have to try to balance out, as we are expanding, do we need to figure out a better way to pick up trash? Is there a better way for us to have first responders be 10 seconds faster to sites? And so we have to look at that, as well as balancing, updating some infrastructure that's functioning and working. And so there's all this long-term planning that we work on, but again, it's trying to put a puzzle together. Here's all the pieces we have, and then trying to figure out the sequence in which you can get to those things. And so I agree with your perspective and your assessment of how things change, and it's just challenging to keep all the balls in the air. Of keeping a city running, and then all at the same time making sure that we're improving the tech at the same time.
So I'm very conscious of time, and I apologize to each of you that I didn't get a chance, or we didn't get a chance to address your questions, but there is networking and plenty of time to keep the discussion going. So it's 11 o'clock. We'll just give a minute or two each for final thoughts, and then we'll move on to the next session. And Dr. Larios, I'll start with you, and then we'll just go down the road, and then we'll conclude the panel.
Okay. Well, I guess that it's very important that the cities and the people living in the cities, they don't want to be a number. They want to be a person. And individuals, they want to be with something unique. So technology is bringing this possibility. If we really look how to solve the problems for the people, and not to be engaged in a technology game that this is better, but we want to impose that to the people. So we need to make communities with the people to participate, to look how these innovations can be adapted to their city, to the cultural way, how they live. And emerging from that, you will have some innovators. And just sharing the best practices among IEEE, for example, which is international, then cities can do better strategies to pick up the best things that fit for them, and then look how to evolve in this journey of smart cities. That's what I can say.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hammond.
I was thinking about a course that I teach on human communications theory and practice, and one thing I was emphasizing in class on Wednesday evening was that an organization like a corporation its entity is defined by the communication paths and patterns that exist interpersonally and with mediated communication. I think that's really true for a city as well, that a city is defined by the ways in which people build communication paths and relationships. And I think that would be really smart emphasis for us in communications planning going forward in building smart cities.
I love that idea. Thank you. Thanks for that.
I just came back from, I'm going on to Rome, from Guadalajara, and spent various days with Victor. And Victor is at the University of Guadalajara. It has over 220,000 students. And we had several conferences where Victor invited students from various departments to get involved in a project that is going to be launched at the end of November on connectivity. And it was incredible to feel the energy, the interest, the enthusiasm of 20-something young people who are obviously interested in what's going on in technology, obviously involved in what's going on in technology, but they want also to be part of what is changing in technology as well, which is that in the end, they're very excited about the idea of having use of technology, but they really want it to be about them. And so a lot of the questions were about what IEEE is doing, but the feeling was that if we could step back and just think about what we're trying to achieve, if we know what we're trying to achieve, then we can look at, are we successful? And not just rush through and be outpaced by technology. That was the feeling we were getting. And if we start to have those conversations with younger people, I'm not talking about 10-year-olds, we're talking about adults that are going into the world and working side by side with us. But if we can have those conversations, then we're more likely to produce something in technology that is going to be adopted and trusted.
So let me actually first start by thanking you for allowing me to be part of this incredible panel. So thank you. I guess I'm going to end where I started, and I talked about inclusion and equity. And when you were talking about some of the rules for measuring success, I know you had those on your list, and so I do want to make sure that as we look at smart cities, that it's for everybody. And on the inclusion side, I do want to. This is kind of for the vendor community, is that understand what cities are trying to achieve and make sure that your solutions are meeting something that the city is trying to achieve, not I have this thing, how can you use it? That becomes very challenging for the city. And the City of Austin has a Strategic Direction 2023 plan. And so anytime there's any actions with the vendor community, it should align with something that's part of the strategic direction for the city. And so again, I don't think it's necessarily the city's responsibility, the universities, but I think it's a partnership that we all work together to come up with solutions that advance the quality of life for the residents in our community.
Thank you for that. I'm really enthused because there's a willingness of this panel in these experts to not just stay in their own lane of expertise, but also to expand and invite others in and listen to each other, and also be very clear about what you want and what you don't want. That's what it will take. So I invite all of us to follow their example and do the same in our own daily lives and professional lives. And thank you for your willingness, your questions, your enthusiasm, and thank you to IEEE and to Posy for bringing this together. Appreciate it.
Thank you.